Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and the plugin I'm bringing you today is something very unusual. Its name is Hermepass, which is named after the fellow at Herman Mastering who was looking for some kind of fancy high pass, pretty much the best sounding high pass in the entire world, and wanted just two controls on it: cutoff and a slope selector tool. Well, I went a little bit beyond the beyond with this one. I hope he still likes it, but it's become its own thing. Hermepass is a mastering high pass with a unusual algorithm that doesn't work like anybody else's high pass filter. And I can demonstrate that by the way it functions. Here's how this works. I'll turn on an oscillator. There we got a lot of high pass noise, and that's pitch noise. And then we can turn it on, and we're rolling off the lows, as you can see. That's with the shallowest slope. If I crank up the slope, we can go pretty well up to 1K. And that's what was asked for, was a high pass that would engage in a number of ways. And part of that was to, gosh, that's a little loud. Part of that was to not go too unbearably steep in slope when the frequency went high in pitch. It's supposed to be steeper in slope as you get down into the lower frequencies, and we can fool with that a little bit. Mind you, you will still get some energy down there. The way this is set up is the usable settings for cutoff and slope tend to be around in the middle. And by the way, this one thing about it is okay with both me and the person who is asking for it. We both like having no markings on cutoff and slope. This is for a real mastering engineer with subwoofers and the ability to hear low frequencies, and you have to be able to hear what you're doing. This is not a tool for people who aren't able to monitor what's going on down there. So as you can hear, we've got the cutoff and the slope. And it's letting really low frequency in. Or cutting them off. Say maybe around here is somewhere around 100 hertz or so. And then as you make the slope shallower, it starts building up down there. But there's a catch, and it's part of what makes this plugin what it is. The deal here is I was able to construct an algorithm that sounds basically perfect, but you can't just take subsonic energy away in this algorithm without it coming out somewhere else. So it's like a low-end shaper. And you need to be able to handle bass overshoots. As you can see with this piece of music here, I have padded it so that you can hear it's not likely to overshoot. But this is not something to put on an already limited track and expect to still have your low frequencies peaking exactly to 0. You need to follow it with something like a limiter or whatever to make it work in that context. And I'll demonstrate with the old, this one, Alien Kittens. And I'm sorry, I'm still a little sick from the winter, the blizzards and everything. As I turn this on, you're not really hearing much going on because we're not really cutting off much. This is still leaving everything in there. And bear in mind, the whole point of something like this is you shouldn't be able to hear it working. It should be taking out the low frequencies. I've showed that with the oscillator. I've showed that with the pink noise, and you can see that it happens. But you're not supposed to be able to hear it go away. You're not supposed to be able to hear the tonality or the behavior change in any way. So I'll fool around with it a little bit more. And here we have a setting where some of the lows are starting to go away. You can see that they're coming in like right up to over the 54 dB, and then when we hit this, bam, massive reduction in the super low frequencies. So what we can do is we can drop it down a bit. And now what we've got is something where it sounds very similar. You can't really hear the bass change, but it's still many dB down in the deep subsonics. It's set at a very low frequency. Or I can even make it steeper than that. Let's cut the super subsonics even more. And you notice that the subs on this kick drum that are supposed to go up to about 54, minus 54 at their biggest peaks are drastically suppressed here. I'll inch it up a little more. But you'll also notice the peak output of this plugin. See, we just peaked a little bit, and we were 3 dB down before. This is taking all of the subs that are being taken right out. It's cutting way back down here, and it's rearranging them so that it doesn't sound any different. And it's not a fancy, complicated algorithm doing this. It's a very simple, clean, maintaining the transparency of everything algorithm. This is really set up to hang on to the tone of what you're passing through it, so that it's not making the audio any smaller, it's not cutting back the transparency of anything, and you really shouldn't be able to hear it getting cut in and out. I'm also exaggerating the slope here a great deal, but we can cut it in and out, and we see that our peaking is less than 3 dB. And then if we whack all of the subsonics out of here, while leaving everything audible exactly the same as it was, we're sometimes going more than 3 dB over because it's rearranging what the energy is. So probably what you're interested in now is what it sounds like when you're bringing it up in frequency so much that it's audibly cutting back the lows a little bit. And I'll zip back to the beginning where it's a different track. It's a Stealth Kit Jam because people get tired of hearing alien kittens all the time. And this one has a really deep lows. It's filling in a lot of energy in here. So what we'll do is we'll turn it on. That bass is also very deep too. And let's take the slope back down to around the middle. That's an edit there. And let's try to pull back the bass a little bit. Okay, that's obviously pulled back. And it is peaking out, as you can see. It's still, that energy is still basically there. So you might consider that this is part of what you have when the slope is very steep and it's giving you a big boost. So we'll take the slope down and find out that it's doing some similar things, but it's really capable of sounding tonally pretty much exactly the same as it was, only with a small alteration in the intensity of the deepest bass. And we'll try that. Here's what we start with. You can here, that's much less lows right there, but we'll flatten it out. And we have a sound where we've got all this low end swinging in the original one. And then we're setting it to another setting where we're starting to really cut it back, but it feels and acts like that low end is still there. It's a little deceptive. It's pushing a little bit more energy, but you can see that the extreme lows are way different from what we've got here. I'll cut them back even a little bit more than that. We can make the slope even shallower. So now we have this big alteration of what we've got. This is without it, and this is with it. Notice how the deep bass feels like it's still in there, but you can see on the meter very clearly that it's drastically attenuated. It's just that the tonality is exactly the same as it was. Got it in there. We're trying to keep the character the same way that it was. So just for fun, we'll also crank up the slope a little bit and see if we can get a more exaggerated version of the same effect. See, that really wiped out the lows right there. So we'll bring it back down again. And that's giving a real punch onto the low end. It's reshaping it in a way that's useful. And we're getting a lot of energy. Look at that. That particular track was pushing, let's see, 3 dB, like 5 dB of rearranged energy taken out of the extreme lows and finding its way back into a transient and sounding perfectly natural as it does so. Got this, and then it turns into this. So this is almost like it's almost like a sort of bass exciter, exaggerator kind of thing. You gotta follow it with some kind of limiter or something. Like here, I could put just to demonstrate this, Apple has a limiter. And we'll throw on just the generic Apple limiter. And just for laughs, we could also play with the generic Apple high pass. And firstly, okay, that's pretty intense. So here, what we're doing is we'll make the clip be full crank again. See, this is not going to distort all by itself. And then if we turn on the Apple limiter, the Apple filter, this is at 70 Hertz. Apple one, there's a change in tonality, there's a change in imaging. And interestingly, you notice this is not a different behavior. This is common to other high-pass filters too. So we might as well say goodbye to this guy. And look at what happens when we're using it at full crank, using the Apple limiter. Then engage. We can get a really thick, beefy low end out of this because it's retaining all of the tone you could want. It just needs some kind of handling afterwards to address the changing in the tonality. We're not even seeing it kick in all that often. It's gonna flick up to around here every now and then. See, there's another little bit there. And the limiter is protecting us from blowing up the output. So we get to play with different tonalities out of the bass here. Which is basically the idea. We're shaping what we can get out of it. And increased slope is altering the way that the low end swings, and the cutoff is altering where it kicks in. And then if we turn off the peak limiter, sounds a little bit more natural, but then we also are peaking out too much, or way too much sometimes. So that is Hermepass, the custom high-pass filter for mastering use. It's also designed to handle other things like being able to take stuff in tracking, for instance, and just whack it really aggressively if you like, or have a sort of more gradual roll off there, so you're really reining in the lows, but the slope is extremely gentle. There's even settings in here which are a little bit like my plug-in capacitor. As you start sneaking in slope, we start getting sounds that are going to work out that way. So I hope you like this plugin. It is probably the best high pass I've ever done, and it's all about the tonality of the thing. I mean, it'll measure normally in as much as other high passes have their little overshoot thing going on too. But it's mostly about the tone quality of the sound. And the way that's being done is a combination of different filtering techniques being consolidated together in such a way where the end result is done with one subtract on the input value at long double resolution. So it's being the single mathematical operation to change the input data word is being done at 80 bits and then noise shaped to the floating point bus. So there's the technology under here is kind of what I've been doing with airwindows for some time, but I hope you appreciate it. And Hermepass mastering, I hope you like this. This is my best shot at what you were looking for. I'm kind of reassured to see that the Apple high pass does overshoots too. It seemed as if I was getting some pretty aggressive overshoots out of it, but I think you'll find that mine sounds nicer than the Apple high pass or anybody else's high pass you might be dealing with. At least I hope so. So thank you very much.